The flight attendant's smug smile vanished as the airline owner stepped onto the plane. Just minutes earlier, she'd forced Malcolm, a black teenager, to move from first class despite his protests. Now she stood frozen, watching her boss embrace the boy she'd humiliated. "Dad," Malcolm said. "There's a problem. Before we dive into this incredible story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. If this kind of real-life justice gives you satisfaction, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking true stories that expose prejudice and celebrate triumph. Now, let's take a step back and see how this whole situation unfolded. Elijah Washington built Skyline Airways from nothing but determination and a dream. At 38 years old, he stood as one of the youngest airline CEOs in America, and certainly the only black owner of a major carrier. The path hadn't been easy. After graduating top of his class from Howard University with dual degrees in business and aeronautical engineering, he faced rejection after rejection from established airlines. "We're looking for someone who fits our company culture," they would say, their eyes sliding away from his dark skin and confident posture. "Your qualifications are impressive, but we have concerns about your ability to connect with our primary customer base," another interviewer told him bluntly. Instead of breaking him, these rejections fueled Elijah's ambition. He started small, with 2 regional planes servicing underrepresented communities. Within 10 years, Skyline Airways grew into a respected national carrier known for exceptional customer service and inclusive hiring practices. Throughout his journey, one constant kept Elijah grounded: his son Malcolm. Even when he and Malcolm's mother Zoe divorced 6 years ago, Elijah maintained a close relationship with his boy. At 16, Malcolm was growing into a thoughtful young man with his father's sharp intelligence and his mother's artistic sensibility. Today marked a special occasion. For the first time, Malcolm would travel alone to visit his father's headquarters in Atlanta. Though they spoke daily and saw each other monthly, Malcolm had never visited the operational heart of his father's empire. "You're sure you've got everything?" Zoe fussed over Malcolm's carry-on bag in their Philadelphia home. "Charger? Headphones? Medication for your allergies?" "Mom, I'm good," Malcolm laughed, adjusting his crisp blue button-down shirt. He'd chosen to dress nicely for the trip, wanting to make his father proud. "Dad arranged everything. First-class ticket and all." Zoe's brow furrowed. "I still wish you'd let me drive you to Atlanta." "It's an 8-hour drive, Mom." "The flight is less than 2 hours," Malcolm reasoned. "Plus, Dad wants me to experience the airline as a regular passenger. See the operation from the customer side." "There's nothing regular about first class," Zoe teased, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just, be careful, okay? You know how people can be." Malcolm nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. His father had prepared him for this reality since he was young enough to comprehend it. In their household, the talk wasn't just about birds and bees, but about how to navigate a world that might see his skin before seeing him. "Keep your boarding pass visible," Elijah had advised during their call last night. "Speak clearly and respectfully, even if others don't offer you the same courtesy. Remember that your conduct reflects not just on you, but on all of us." At Philadelphia International Airport, Malcolm experienced the familiar subtle indignities. The ticket agent's momentary surprise when he presented his first-class boarding pass. The security officer who, randomly, selected him for additional screening while waving through white business travelers. The side glances from other passengers as he waited in the premium boarding area. Malcolm handled each moment with the dignity his father had taught him. Head high, voice steady, emotions controlled. He texted his dad, "Security took forever, but I'm at the gate now. Boarding soon." Elijah's reply came instantly, "Proud of you, son. See you in a few hours. Enjoy the flight." Malcolm couldn't know that those simple words would soon feel like bitter irony. The gate agent called for first-class boarding, and Malcolm gathered his carry-on bag. He handed his boarding pass to the agent, who smiled and wished him a pleasant flight. As he walked down the jet bridge, Malcolm felt a flutter of excitement. Though he'd flown first class with his father before, this marked his first solo premium experience. The cabin gleamed with polished surfaces and plush leather seats. A flight attendant with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a crisp uniform stood at the entrance. Her name tag read Rebecca Miller. Her welcoming smile faltered when she saw Malcolm. "Excuse me, young man," she said, her voice sugar-coated but firm. "First-class passengers are boarding now. You'll need to wait until your group is called." Malcolm politely extended his boarding pass. "I'm in first class. Seat 2A. Rebecca took the boarding pass, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she reluctantly stepped aside. "Very well." Malcolm found his window seat and settled in, placing his backpack under the seat in front of him. He couldn't help noticing Rebecca watching him while pretending to organize the galley. Twice she walked past, glancing at his seat number. Other passengers filtered in. A white businessman in seat 2B gave Malcolm a double-take before sitting beside him. An elderly couple across the aisle smiled warmly. A middle-aged woman in designer clothes frowned when she noticed him, then leaned toward Rebecca, whispering something that made the flight attendant nod knowingly. Malcolm focused on his phone, texting his friend Tyler about the Atlanta Falcons game they planned to attend that weekend. He tried ignoring the growing discomfort in the cabin, the feeling of being watched, judged. Rebecca approached his seat again, this time with a passenger manifest in hand. "Excuse me, but could I see your boarding pass again?" Malcolm produced it from his pocket. "And do you have ID?" she asked, her tone suggesting this was standard procedure, though no other passengers had been similarly questioned. Malcolm handed over his student ID. "Is there a problem?" "Just routine verification," Rebecca said, though her expression suggested otherwise. "Washington. Malcolm Washington. How did you come to be in first class today?" The businessman beside Malcolm shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. "My father arranged it," Malcolm answered simply. "And who might your father be?" Rebecca pressed, skepticism evident. "Elijah Washington. He owns Skyline Airways." Rebecca's polite veneer cracked as she laughed incredulously. "Skyline Airways? Young man, making false claims won't help your situation." "It's not a false claim," Malcolm insisted, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. "You can call and verify." Another flight attendant, a young Asian man whose name tag read James Chen, approached. "Everything okay here, Rebecca?" Rebecca turned to her colleague. "This young man claims to be the son of our airline's owner. He's obviously confused about his seating assignment." James glanced at Malcolm's boarding pass. "His ticket is valid for 2A. If there's been a mistake, it's in the system." "There's no mistake," Malcolm said firmly. "My father is Elijah Washington, the founder and CEO of Skyline Airways." James's eyes widened slightly in recognition, but Rebecca cut him off. "That's absurd. The owner of this airline is not." She stopped herself, but her implication hung in the air. "Not what?" Malcolm challenged. Rebecca ignored his question. "James, please assist the other passengers. I'll handle this situation." She turned back to Malcolm. "Young man, I don't know how you ended up with this boarding pass, but I believe there's been a misunderstanding. We need this seat for legitimate first-class passengers." The businessman beside Malcolm finally spoke up, though weakly. "His boarding pass seems valid." "Sir, please let me handle this," Rebecca snapped before addressing Malcolm again. "I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and move to your proper seat in economy." "This is my proper seat," Malcolm insisted, his heart pounding. "Call my father if you don't believe me." "There's no need for that," Rebecca said dismissively. "Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. There are passengers waiting to board." Malcolm reached for his phone. "I'm calling my father." "Phones must be in airplane mode now," Rebecca said, her voice rising. "You need to comply with crew member instructions. It's a federal regulation." Several passengers were openly watching now. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed darkly satisfied. Malcolm felt trapped, humiliated, and increasingly angry. He considered his options. Making a scene could escalate the situation dangerously. Complying under protest seemed the safest route. "I'll move," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "but I want your full name and employee ID number." "That won't be necessary," Rebecca replied. "Now please gather your things quickly. You're delaying the flight." With burning eyes and stiff movements, Malcolm collected his backpack. The walk through first class felt endless, every step an exercise in swallowed pride. As he passed James, the flight attendant whispered, "I'm sorry." In that moment, Malcolm understood something his father had tried to explain. Sometimes, the cruelest aspect of discrimination wasn't the act itself, but the silence of those who recognized the injustice yet did nothing to stop it. The economy section bustled with activity as passengers stowed luggage and found their seats. Malcolm stood in the aisle, boarding pass in hand, searching for his newly assigned spot, 23B, a middle seat in the rear of the aircraft. "Excuse me," he said to a heavy-set man occupying the aisle seat. "I think I'm in 23B. The man sighed dramatically but stood to let Malcolm squeeze past. On the window side sat a teenage girl with headphones, who barely glanced up from her phone. Malcolm settled between them, his knees pressed against the seat in front, a stark contrast to the spacious first-class accommodation that was rightfully his. His mind raced with thoughts of what his father would do in this situation. Elijah Washington had built his reputation on calm assertiveness and strategic thinking. Malcolm decided to try once more to resolve the situation through proper channels. When a different flight attendant passed by, Malcolm gently caught her attention. Her name tag identified her as Denise Cooper, and her warm brown complexion and kind eyes gave Malcolm a flicker of hope. "Excuse me, Miss Cooper. I need some help. I was wrongfully removed from my first-class seat by another attendant." Denise looked concerned. "What happened?" Malcolm explained the situation succinctly, showing her his original boarding pass for seat 2A. "That doesn't sound right," Denise frowned. "Let me check with the lead attendant once we complete the pre-flight checks. We're a bit behind schedule now." "Thank you," Malcolm said, feeling a small measure of relief. "My father is Elijah Washington, the owner of Skyline. I'd appreciate if you could help sort this out." Denise's eyes widened slightly, but unlike Rebecca, she didn't dismiss his claim. "I'll look into it right away," she promised before continuing down the aisle. Malcolm took out his phone to text his father before takeoff. He kept the message factual and calm. "Dad, there's a situation on the flight. A flight attendant named Rebecca Miller forced me out of my first-class seat, claiming I didn't belong there. She wouldn't believe me when I mentioned you. I'm now seated in economy. Another attendant named Denise is trying to help." He pressed send just as the announcement came to put devices in airplane mode. The man beside him glowered at the phone. "They said airplane mode, kid." Malcolm complied, then closed his eyes, trying to process his emotions. Anger, humiliation, and frustration churned inside him, but he remembered his father's words, "Never let them see they've gotten to you. That's giving away your power." The aircraft doors closed, and the safety demonstration began. Through the aisle, Malcolm could see Rebecca serving pre-departure beverages in first class, smiling warmly at the white businessman now enjoying the seat that should have been his. As the flight attendants prepared for takeoff, Malcolm noticed Rebecca deliberately avoiding his section during her cabin check. When drink service began 30 minutes later, she skipped his row entirely, serving passengers in front and behind but not acknowledging him or his seatmates. "Excuse me," Malcolm called out as she passed again, but Rebecca pretended not to hear. The elderly woman across the aisle noticed. She was white-haired and petite, with kind eyes that crinkled with concern. When the attendant left, she leaned over and offered Malcolm her untouched bottle of water. "Here, young man. You look like you could use this." "Thank you, ma'am," Malcolm said, genuinely touched by the simple kindness. "Dorothy Williams," she introduced herself. "I couldn't help overhearing earlier." "That wasn't right. What happened to you?" Malcolm nodded, unsure what to say. "Reminds me of the old days," Dorothy continued quietly. "I marched with Dr. King in Selma. Thought we'd come further than this by now." Malcolm found himself engaged in conversation with Dorothy, who shared stories of her civil rights activism in the 1960s. Her words gave him perspective, placing his current indignity within a longer struggle for equality and respect. "The important thing," Dorothy told him, "is not to let it harden your heart. That's what they want. Stay soft inside, but strong in your convictions." Their conversation was interrupted by the captain's voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're currently holding position on the tarmac due to a last-minute passenger accommodation. We should be underway shortly." Murmurs of annoyance rippled through the cabin. Malcolm checked his watch. They should have departed 20 minutes ago. He noticed Denise hurrying down the aisle, looking agitated. James appeared from first class, engaged in intense conversation with another crew member. Something was happening. "What's the holdup?" the man next to Malcolm grumbled. "Some people have connections to make." Malcolm's phone vibrated in his pocket. Discreetly, he checked the screen. One new message from Dad: "Stay in your seat." "I'm handling it." Malcolm's heart raced. What did that mean? Before he could speculate further, he noticed Rebecca rushing toward economy class, her face flushed and expression panicked. She stopped at the sight of Malcolm, then quickly turned and hurried back toward the front of the plane. Dorothy leaned over again. "Something's afoot," she whispered with a knowing smile. "And I have a feeling justice might be about to board this flight." The atmosphere inside the aircraft shifted palpably as whispers raced through the cabin. Passengers craned their necks, trying to see what was happening at the entrance. Malcolm remained in his cramped middle seat, heart pounding against his ribs as he contemplated his father's cryptic message. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice returned, sounding notably different than before, "we have the privilege of welcoming a special passenger aboard our flight today. Please join me in greeting the founder and CEO of Skyline Airways, Mr. Elijah Washington." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin, followed by murmurs and the clicking of phone cameras. Malcolm sat up straighter, a mixture of emotions washing over him: relief, vindication, and a touch of apprehension about what would unfold. Elijah Washington stepped into view at the front of the plane. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. Tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to navigating hostile environments with dignity. His close-cropped hair showed distinguished touches of silver at the temples, and his expression remained professionally neutral as he nodded acknowledgments to surprised passengers. Malcolm watched as his father paused in first class, his gaze lingering on the now-occupied seat 2A. The businessman who had taken Malcolm's place shifted uncomfortably under Elijah's steady regard. Rebecca stood nearby, her formerly authoritative demeanor replaced by visible anxiety as she twisted her hands in front of her uniform. Without comment, Elijah continued his deliberate walk through the aircraft. Passengers whispered as he passed. Some reached out for handshakes or attempted to engage him, but Elijah remained focused, his eyes scanning each row until they found what he sought. When father and son locked eyes, something powerful and unspoken passed between them. Elijah's composed expression softened momentarily with a flash of fierce paternal love before returning to professional neutrality. "Malcolm," he said simply, his deep voice carrying through the suddenly quiet cabin. "Dad," Malcolm responded, rising as much as the limited space allowed. The heavy-set man blocking Malcolm's exit to the aisle hurriedly stood, now eager to accommodate. "Sir, please, let me get out of your way." Elijah waited patiently as Malcolm gathered his backpack and squeezed into the aisle. Then, In full view of every passenger, Elijah embraced his son firmly. The gesture spoke volumes, not just paternal affection, but public acknowledgement and protection. "Are you okay?" Elijah asked quietly. "I'm fine," Malcolm assured him, though the slight tremor in his voice suggested otherwise. Elijah turned to Dorothy, who had been watching the reunion with undisguised satisfaction. "Thank you for looking after my son, ma'am." Dorothy smiled. "He's a credit to you, Mr. Washington. Handled himself with more dignity than most grown folks would have." Elijah nodded appreciatively before addressing the situation directly. "Malcolm, I'd like you to tell me exactly what happened. Don't leave anything out." As Malcolm recounted the incident, Rebecca's initial suspicion, her repeated questioning, her dismissal of his identity, and his forced removal to economy, other passengers in nearby seats listened intently. Some looked away in shame, others nodded in grim recognition of a familiar pattern of behavior. Rebecca appeared at the back of the plane, her face flushed. "Mr. Washington, if I could just explain." Elijah raised a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. "Ms. Miller, I believe that's your name. I'll speak with you and the rest of the crew shortly. Right now, I'm talking with my son." Rebecca retreated, visibly shaken by the public rebuke. "Malcolm," Elijah continued calmly, "I believe you had a first-class seat assignment. Let's get you back where you belong." The walk back to first class felt entirely different from the humiliating journey Malcolm had made earlier. Now, with his father beside him, passengers watched with a mixture of reactions: embarrassment, regret, and in some cases, resentment at having their assumptions challenged so publicly. James stood at the entrance to first class, looking simultaneously relieved and anxious. "Mr. Washington, sir, I want to apologize for not intervening more forcefully earlier." "We'll discuss crew protocols later, Mr. Chen," Elijah responded evenly. "For now, my son needs to be reseated in his assigned space." The businessman occupying Malcolm's original seat was already gathering his belongings, avoiding eye contact as he prepared to relocate. Rebecca hovered nearby, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Sir," she attempted again, "there was a misunderstanding." "Was there?" Elijah's question hung in the air, pointed and unmistakable in its implication. "Would you have removed my son from his rightful seat if he were white?" Comment number 1: if you think Rebecca would have questioned a white teenager in first class. Comment number 2: if you believe this kind of discrimination happens every day without being addressed. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race? Like this video if you believe Elijah handled this situation with the perfect balance of dignity and assertiveness. Subscribe if you want to see how this confrontation unfolds and whether justice will be served. What would you do if you were in Elijah's position right now? Let's continue and find out how he addresses this blatant discrimination. As Malcolm settled back into his rightful first-class seat, the tension in the cabin thickened. Elijah remained standing, his tall frame commanding attention without effort. He surveyed the first-class section, making deliberate eye contact with several passengers who had witnessed his son's humiliation without intervention. "Malcolm, I'll be right back," Elijah said, his voice measured. "I need to speak with the flight crew." Rebecca stood rigid near the galley, her complexion alternating between flush and pallor. James lingered nearby, while Denise had joined them from economy class, concern evident on her face. "Captain," Elijah addressed the intercom, "this is Elijah Washington. I need to speak with you and your crew in the forward galley, please." The captain's voice responded promptly, "Of course, Mr. Washington. I'll send my first officer to the cockpit and join you immediately." Passengers throughout the aircraft watched the unfolding drama with rapt attention. Many had their phones out, recording snippets despite the flight attendants' half-hearted requests to desist. The incident was rapidly transforming from a personal humiliation into a public reckoning. In the galley, Elijah stood with perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back as the captain, 3 flight attendants, and the purser gathered in the confined space. The atmosphere crackled with tension. "I'll be direct," Elijah began, his voice low but intense. My 16-year-old son was publicly humiliated, accused of lying about his identity, and forcibly removed from his assigned seat based on what appears to be racial profiling by a member of your crew. Rebecca started to speak, but the captain raised his hand. Mr. Washington, on behalf of the entire crew, I want to express our deepest apologies. Captain Stevens, Elijah interrupted gently, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm more interested in understanding how this happened on an airline that has explicit anti-discrimination policies that I personally implemented. He turned to Rebecca. Ms. Miller, I'd like to hear your explanation. Rebecca straightened her uniform jacket, attempting to regain her professional demeanor. Mr. Washington, I was simply following protocol for passenger verification. The young man's presence in first class seemed unusual, and when he made claims about being related to the airline's owner, I had reason to believe he was being untruthful. What specifically seemed unusual about my son's presence in first class? Elijah pressed. Rebecca hesitated, awareness of the minefield she was navigating evident in her expression. He's very young to be traveling alone in premium class, and he wasn't dressed like our typical first-class passengers. James interjected, Sir, Malcolm was wearing a button-down shirt and khakis. He was more formally dressed than several other passengers in first class. Rebecca shot James a withering look. There were other factors that raised concerns. Such as? Elijah's question hung in the air, daring her to speak the unspoken. His behavior seemed suspicious, Rebecca offered weakly. Elaborate on suspicious, Elijah requested, his calm persistence more unnerving than anger would have been. He seemed. Rebecca stumbled, then regrouped. Mr. Washington, I was doing my job. We have protocols for security and passenger verification. I'm intimately familiar with our protocols, Ms. Miller, having written many of them myself, Elijah responded. There is no protocol that instructs crew members to remove passengers with valid boarding passes from their assigned seats based on subjective assessments of whether they look like they belong there. Captain Stevens intervened, Mr. Washington, I can assure you this isn't representative of how we train our staff. Yet it happened, Captain, Elijah noted. And I'm curious why no one intervened when my son was being mistreated. James looked at the floor. I tried to point out that his boarding pass was valid, but I didn't push harder when Rebecca overruled me. I should have. Denise added, Malcolm approached me in economy about the situation. I was going to investigate after completing the pre-flight checks, but by then you had arrived, sir. Elijah nodded, acknowledging their statements before returning his attention to Rebecca. Ms. Miller, when my son told you who he was, who his father was, why didn't you simply verify this information? A quick call to the gate, a check of the passenger manifest notes, or even a simple Google search would have prevented this entire situation. Rebecca's professional veneer cracked further. With all due respect, sir, people make false claims all the time. It seemed highly improbable that he was telling the truth. Improbable because. Elijah let the question hang. The uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes. Everyone in the galley knew exactly why Rebecca had found it improbable that a young black man could be the son of an airline owner. Let me be perfectly clear, Elijah continued, his voice taking on an edge of steel. Skyline Airways was founded specifically to create an inclusive travel experience where every passenger is treated with equal respect regardless of their appearance, age, or race. What happened today represents a fundamental violation of our core values. He addressed the entire crew. I will not cancel this flight because that would inconvenience hundreds of passengers and disrupt our operations. However, Ms. Miller, you will not be continuing to Atlanta today. Rebecca's eyes widened. Sir, you can't just. I can and I am, Elijah stated firmly. You will be replaced by a reserve flight attendant for this service. Upon our arrival in Atlanta, there will be a full investigation into this incident, with appropriate consequences to follow. The captain nodded, acknowledging the decision. I'll make the arrangements immediately. One more thing, Elijah added. I want an announcement made to the passengers explaining the delay and the reason for the crew change. Complete transparency is essential here. Rebecca's composure finally broke. This is outrageous. I was doing my job, following my instincts about a security concern. Your instincts led you to discriminate against my son, Elijah replied evenly. And now you'll face the consequences of that decision. Captain Stevens, please arrange for Ms. Miller's replacement. I'll return to my seat with Malcolm. As Elijah turned to leave the galley, Rebecca made a last desperate attempt. You're only doing this because he's your son. If he were anyone else's child, you wouldn't care. Elijah paused, turning back slowly. You're wrong, Ms. Miller. I would care deeply regardless of whose child was mistreated on my airline. The difference is, if he weren't my son, I might never have known about it. How many other passengers have you humiliated who didn't have the power to hold you accountable? With that final question lingering in the air, Elijah returned to the first-class cabin. He settled into the seat beside Malcolm, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. What's going to happen now? Malcolm asked quietly. Justice, Elijah replied simply. And hopefully, change. Minutes later, passengers watched as airport security personnel boarded the plane and escorted Rebecca off the aircraft. Her face was masked with indignation, but beneath it, something else was visible, the dawning realization that actions which had previously gone unchallenged now had consequences. The captain's voice came over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the continued delay. We're making a crew adjustment and will be departing shortly. We at Skyline Airways have a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior of any kind. Today, we failed to uphold that standard, and for that, we sincerely apologize, especially to our passenger in seat 2A. We're committed to making this right and ensuring similar incidents never occur again." A smattering of applause broke out, primarily from the economy section. In first class, the response was more subdued, with several passengers looking distinctly uncomfortable as the reality of their silent complicity settled upon them. Once airborne, the Boeing 737 settled into its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as passengers adjusted to the rhythm of flight. In first class, Malcolm sat beside his father, the initial adrenaline of the confrontation gradually giving way to a quieter emotional processing. "You didn't have to come get me," Malcolm said softly, breaking the silence between them. "I could have handled it." Elijah studied his son's profile, noting the set of his jaw and the maturity in his eyes that hadn't been there even a year ago. "I know you could have. That's not why I came." "Then why?" "Because no one should have to handle discrimination alone," Elijah replied. "And because some lessons can't be taught theoretically. They need to be demonstrated." Malcolm nodded slowly, understanding filtering through his expression. "The lesson being?" "That we don't just endure injustice when we have the power to confront it," Elijah explained. "For generations, our people had to swallow their dignity just to survive. But we live in a different time now. You and I have privileges that our ancestors couldn't imagine: education, resources, influence. With those privileges comes responsibility. Responsibility to fight back. Responsibility to change the system," Elijah clarified. "Fighting back is reactive. Creating change is proactive." A flight attendant approached, not Rebecca, who was now presumably on her way back to Philadelphia, but James, who had been present during the initial incident. "Mr. Washington, Malcolm, can I get you anything to drink?" James asked, his manner respectfully subdued. "Water for me," Elijah replied. "Malcolm?" "Apple juice, please," Malcolm requested. As James prepared their beverages, Elijah asked, "How long have you been with Skyline, Mr. Chen?" 3 years, sir," James answered. "Started right after college. And in those 3 years, have you witnessed similar incidents?" James hesitated, glancing around to ensure no other passengers were listening closely. "Nothing this blatant, sir. But subtle things, yes. I appreciate your honesty, Elijah said. When we land, I'd like you to speak with my chief of staff about specific instances. We can't address what we don't acknowledge. Yes, sir, James replied, setting their drinks down. And sir, I want to apologize again for not stepping in more forcefully earlier. I should have done more. After James moved on to other passengers, Malcolm turned to his father. He's feeling guilty. As he should, Elijah responded, not unkindly. Bystanders who recognize injustice but remain silent are complicit in it. But guilt without action is useless. If his guilt motivates him to behave differently next time, then it serves a purpose. Their conversation was interrupted by an older gentleman from across the aisle who leaned over, hand extended. Mr. Washington. Frank Holloway. I'm a frequent flyer with Skyline, and I just wanted to say, what happened earlier was inexcusable. I should have spoken up when I saw how that young man was being treated. Elijah shook the offered hand. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Holloway. Perhaps next time you'll feel empowered to intervene. There shouldn't be a next time, Holloway said firmly. Not on this airline or any other. One by one, several first-class passengers approached to offer similar sentiments. Some seemed genuinely remorseful, while others appeared more concerned with being on the CEO's good side. Malcolm observed each interaction closely, noting how his father maintained the same dignified demeanor with everyone, regardless of their apparent sincerity. A flight attendant appeared with an elderly passenger in tow. Mr. Washington, this gentleman requested to speak with you. Elijah rose slightly in his seat. Dorothy, isn't it? From economy class? Dorothy Williams smiled warmly. You remembered. I just wanted to check on this young man. We were having quite a meaningful conversation before all the excitement. Please, join us, Elijah gestured to an empty first-class seat nearby. We have space. As Dorothy settled in, Malcolm noticed notifications flooding his phone. Social media was already buzzing with videos and accounts of the incident. One clip, showing Elijah embracing him in the economy section, had already garnered thousands of shares and comments. Dad, Malcolm said quietly, showing him the screen. It's going viral. Elijah examined the footage, his expression thoughtful. I suppose that was inevitable in today's world. He turned to his son. How do you feel about becoming the center of this particular conversation? Malcolm considered the question carefully. If it helps prevent someone else from experiencing what I did, then I'm okay with it. But it's weird seeing strangers debate what happened to me like it's entertainment. That's the double-edged sword of these moments, Elijah noted. They create awareness but can also become spectacles divorced from the real human experience at their center. Dorothy leaned forward. In my day, we didn't have social media to amplify our stories. We relied on word of mouth and hoped newspapers might cover our struggles if they were dramatic enough. There's power in having your truth seen by thousands, even millions. Use it wisely. As they conversed, Malcolm noticed Denise speaking urgently into a crew phone at the front of the cabin. When she finished, she approached Elijah. Mr. Washington, I've just received word from our Atlanta station. There are reporters gathering at the gate. The story has reached local news outlets. Elijah sighed. That was faster than expected. Thank you for letting me know. He turned to Malcolm. It seems our private moment has become very public. Are you prepared for that? Malcolm straightened in his seat. What would you do, if you were me? I'd recognize this as an opportunity, Elijah replied. Not for personal attention, but to direct the conversation toward the broader issue. You've experienced something that happens to people of color every day, usually without witness or recourse. Your platform is temporary, but your message can have lasting impact. Malcolm nodded, absorbing his father's wisdom. Then I'm ready. Dorothy reached across to pat Malcolm's hand. That's the spirit, young man. When life hands you lemons, Make legislative and corporate policy changes, Elijah finished with a rare smile, causing both Malcolm and Dorothy to laugh. For the remainder of the flight, Malcolm alternated between conversations with his father and Dorothy, the unexpected mentor who had shown him kindness when others hadn't. They discussed everything from Dorothy's experiences marching with Dr. King to Malcolm's aspirations of combining business and social justice in his future career. Meanwhile, phones throughout the cabin lit up with notifications as the story continued to spread. Passengers sneaked glances at father and son, some recording surreptitiously despite announcements prohibiting such behavior. What had begun as one teenager's humiliation was transforming into a national conversation about dignity, accountability, and the stubborn persistence of racial bias in everyday interactions. As the captain announced their initial descent into Atlanta, Elijah's phone buzzed with a message from his chief of staff. PR team assembled. Board members briefed. Media presence growing at terminal. How do you want to handle this? Elijah showed the message to Malcolm. Any thoughts? Malcolm considered for a moment. Tell the truth. All of it. No corporate speak. Elijah nodded, pride evident in his expression as he typed a response. Malcolm and I will address the situation directly. Prepare statement emphasizing zero tolerance for discrimination and concrete steps for improvement. This isn't a PR crisis, it's a teaching moment. We'll lean into it. The plane banked gently, beginning its approach to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. As the Atlanta skyline came into view, Malcolm realized that this trip to visit his father's headquarters had already taught him more about leadership than any behind-the-scenes tour ever could. The thunderous clicking of camera shutters greeted Elijah and Malcolm as they emerged from the jet bridge. Dozens of reporters crowded the gate area, their questions overlapping in an incomprehensible jumble of curiosity and urgency. Airport security personnel created a narrow pathway through the media throng, while Skyline Airways staff flanked father and son protectively. Mr. Washington. Can you confirm reports of racial profiling on your airline? Malcolm. How does it feel to be removed from first class on your father's own company? Was the flight attendant terminated? Will there be legal action? Elijah raised a hand, and the clamor subsided slightly. We'll address your questions at a proper press conference. For now, my son and I are headed to Skyline headquarters where we'll prepare a formal statement. Thank you for your understanding. With practiced efficiency, Elijah guided Malcolm through the terminal toward a waiting car, his hand firm on his son's shoulder. Only when the vehicle doors closed behind them did both exhale deeply. That was intense, Malcolm commented, loosening his collar button. And it's just beginning, Elijah replied, checking his vibrating phone. Your mother has called 4 times in the last 20 minutes. You should call her back. Malcolm winced, realizing he hadn't updated Zoe about the situation. Before he could dial, his own phone lit up with her incoming call. Mom, I'm okay, he answered immediately. Malcolm James Washington, I've been watching the news for the past hour. Zoe's voice crackled with maternal concern and anger. Why didn't you call me the moment this happened? It all unfolded pretty quickly, Malcolm explained, recounting the details while his father listened, occasionally nodding in confirmation. I'm booking a flight to Atlanta right now, Zoe declared. Mom, that's not necessary. It absolutely is necessary, she interrupted. My son was publicly humiliated because of the color of his skin. I'm coming there, and I'm bringing our attorney. Elijah gently requested the phone. Zoe, it's Elijah. I understand your concern, but rushing to Atlanta might escalate the media situation unnecessarily. Malcolm is safe, he's handling this with remarkable maturity, and we're addressing it directly. Don't you dare tell me what's necessary when it comes to our son, Elijah, Zoe replied, her voice steely. I warned you both about this trip. I knew something like this could happen. And now that it has, we're dealing with it, Elijah countered calmly. This isn't just about Malcolm anymore. The incident has already gone viral. We have an opportunity to create meaningful change in how the airline industry addresses bias and discrimination. After further discussion, they reached a compromise. Zoe would wait 24 hours before deciding whether to fly to Atlanta, giving Elijah and Malcolm time to assess the situation and develop a response strategy. At Skyline headquarters, the executive floor buzzed with crisis management activity. Elijah's chief of staff, Tara Reynolds, had assembled the leadership team in the main conference room. Screens displayed news coverage and social media trends tracking the incident's viral spread. "It's the top trending topic nationally," Tara reported as Elijah and Malcolm entered. "The video from the plane has over 2 million views already. We're receiving thousands of messages, some supportive, others, not so much. What's the board saying?" Elijah asked, accepting a tablet displaying urgent communications. "They're divided," Tara admitted. "Some are fully behind you taking a strong stand. Others are concerned about potential boycotts and stock implications. And our competitors?" Already capitalizing on the situation, another executive chimed in. United and Delta have both issued statements reaffirming their commitment to inclusive practices, implicitly distancing themselves from our incident. Malcolm observed the corporate machinery in motion, fascinated despite the circumstances. This was his father's world, rapid decision-making under pressure with millions of dollars and thousands of jobs potentially at stake. As discussions continued about legal implications and public relations strategies, Malcolm's phone buzzed with text messages from classmates and friends who had seen the news. Most expressed outrage and support, but a few messages stood out for their different tone. "Dude, why didn't you just move when she asked? Not worth the drama. Playing the race card much? Your dad owns the company, we get it." These messages stung more than Malcolm expected. He set his phone aside, refocusing on the meeting as Elijah addressed the team. "I appreciate everyone's input, but let me be clear about our approach," Elijah stated firmly. "We will not minimize this incident, we will not deflect responsibility, and we will not prioritize short-term stock prices over our core values. Skyline was founded on the principle that air travel should be equally dignified for all passengers. Today, we failed to uphold that principle." "What about Rebecca Miller?" Tara asked. "She's already lawyered up, claiming wrongful termination and reverse discrimination. Conservative media outlets are reaching out to her for interviews." Elijah nodded, having anticipated this development. "She hasn't been terminated yet, she's on administrative leave pending investigation. If she wants to tell her side of the story, that's her right. We'll respond with facts, not rhetoric." As the meeting continued, Malcolm excused himself to use the restroom. In the hallway, he encountered James Chen, the flight attendant who had witnessed the initial incident. "Malcolm," James greeted him awkwardly. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Malcolm replied. "Better than this morning, anyway." James hesitated, then spoke with evident regret. "I should have done more when Rebecca was questioning you. I knew what was happening, but I just didn't push hard enough." "Why didn't you?" Malcolm asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. "Honestly? Fear," James admitted. "Not just of losing my job, but of making the situation worse somehow. It's easier to tell yourself you'll be the hero next time than to actually be one in the moment." Malcolm nodded, appreciating the candor. "My dad says change happens when enough people decide that next time is now." Back in the conference room, the discussion had shifted to concrete action steps. Elijah noticed Malcolm's return and brought him into the conversation. "Malcolm, this affects you most directly. What would you like to see come from this incident?" All eyes turned to the teenager, who took a moment to gather his thoughts before responding. "I think there are two issues here," Malcolm began carefully. "The first is about accountability for what happened today. But the bigger issue is about prevention. How do we make sure this doesn't keep happening to other people who don't have a CEO father to intervene?" Elijah nodded encouragingly. "I'd like to see comprehensive anti-bias training for all Skyline employees," Malcolm continued with growing confidence. "Not just a one-time session, but ongoing education with real metrics for success. And maybe a scholarship program for minority students interested in aviation careers. To help change the industry from the inside. The executives exchanged impressed glances. Tara was already taking notes. "Those are excellent suggestions," Elijah affirmed. "Tara, let's develop implementation plans for both initiatives immediately. And Malcolm, I'd like you to be involved in designing them, if you're willing." The meeting concluded with clear action items assigned to various team members. As the executives filed out, Elijah's personal assistant entered with an urgent message. "Sir, Rebecca Miller is live on Channel 4 News right now, discussing the incident." The television in the conference room flickered to life, revealing Rebecca in a carefully composed interview setting. Her hair and makeup were impeccable, her expression one of wounded professionalism. "I was simply doing my job," she explained to the sympathetic interviewer. "In today's security environment, we have to be vigilant about unusual situations. When a very young passenger claims to be related to the airline's owner but can't provide proper verification, that raises legitimate concerns." "And did you apply these same standards to all passengers?" the interviewer asked. "Absolutely," Rebecca insisted. "This had nothing to do with race. I would have questioned any young person in similar circumstances. The fact that Mr. Washington immediately removed me from the flight without a proper investigation speaks to a concerning double standard. If anything, I'm the victim of reverse discrimination here." Elijah watched silently, his expression unreadable. When the segment ended, he turned to Malcolm. "And that," he said quietly, "is why documentation and witness statements are so important. Her version omits key facts and distorts others. Without multiple witnesses and potential video evidence, it would be her word against yours." "Will she get away with it?" Malcolm asked. "No," Elijah assured him. "Truth has staying power that lies don't. But we need to be prepared for a longer battle than I initially anticipated." As they left the conference room, Malcolm's phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy Williams, the elderly woman from the flight, watching the news. "Remember what I told you about staying soft inside but strong in your convictions. This is just the beginning of your journey, young man. Call if you need an old-timer's perspective." Malcolm smiled, appreciating the unexpected alliance formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. As challenging as the day had been, it had also revealed powerful truths about human character, both flawed and inspiring, that no textbook could have taught him. 1 month after the incident, Malcolm stood before a crowd of 300 high school students at the Young Leaders of Tomorrow conference in Chicago. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Many attendees had specifically registered after learning he would be speaking about his viral experience. "I never planned to become a hashtag," Malcolm began, earning understanding laughter from the audience. "I was just a kid trying to visit his dad. But what happened to me on that flight happens to people who look like us every day, in stores, in restaurants, in schools, and in workplaces across America. The only difference is, most don't have cameras recording and a CEO father to intervene." As Malcolm delivered his carefully prepared speech, he reflected on the whirlwind month since the incident. True to her word, Zoe had flown to Atlanta the day after the confrontation, bringing the family's longtime attorney, Stephen Rodriguez. Together with Elijah's legal team, they had mapped out a comprehensive approach to address both the specific incident and its broader implications. Rebecca Miller's wrongful termination lawsuit had been filed with dramatic flair and extensive media coverage. Conservative outlets portrayed her as a conscientious employee being sacrificed on the altar of political correctness. Liberal media countered with analyses of implicit bias and the persistent reality of traveling while black. What Rebecca hadn't anticipated was the steady stream of former Skyline employees and passengers who came forward with similar stories about her behavior. A flight attendant of Puerto Rican descent described being constantly critiqued on her appearance and accent. A Nigerian businessman recounted being questioned about his first-class ticket on 3 separate occasions. A Middle Eastern family recalled Rebecca summoning security when their toddler became fussy during boarding. The discovery process revealed a personnel file containing multiple customer complaints that had been addressed with nothing more than verbal warnings. The lawsuit quickly transformed from Rebecca's offensive maneuver to a defensive struggle as her pattern of behavior came to light. "What I learned," Malcolm continued in his speech, "is that silence protects the status quo. When we don't speak up about discrimination, whether we're experiencing it or witnessing it, we allow it to continue unchallenged. But I also learned that speaking up requires courage, because those who benefit from the current system will fight to preserve it." In the audience, Elijah watched proudly as his son articulated insights that many adults never grasp. Beside him sat Dorothy Williams, who had become an unexpected mentor to Malcolm. After learning of her civil rights background, Elijah had invited her to join Skyline's newly formed Community Advisory Board, which provided input on diversity and inclusion initiatives. "The most important question isn't whether bias exists," Malcolm told the attentive students. "We know it does. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And that's where each of you comes in." He outlined the scholarship program that Skyline Airways had established in the wake of the incident, the Future in Flight Initiative, providing educational and career opportunities for minority students interested in aviation. The first cohort of 20 scholars would begin their journey that fall. Meanwhile, across town in the federal courthouse, Rebecca Miller's lawsuit was reaching its conclusion. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years on the bench, had grown increasingly impatient with Rebecca's shifting narrative as evidence mounted against her claims. "Ms. Miller," the judge addressed her directly, "you have alleged wrongful termination, yet documents show you were placed on administrative leave with pay pending investigation, not terminated. You claim reverse discrimination, yet testimony from multiple witnesses of various backgrounds establishes a pattern of differential treatment toward minority passengers. You assert you were simply following security protocols, yet Skyline Airways' actual written procedures contradict your actions in this case." Rebecca sat stiffly beside her attorney, her once confident demeanor now brittle with defensive anger. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The defendant's records indicate that following their internal investigation, you were offered reinstatement conditional upon completing their enhanced anti-bias training program, an offer you declined in favor of pursuing this lawsuit." The verdict, when it came, was unequivocal: judgment for the defendant, Skyline Airways. Rebecca's claims were dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could not refile the suit. As a final blow, the judge ordered Rebecca to pay a portion of Skyline's legal fees, citing the frivolous nature of the lawsuit in light of the evidence presented. Back at the youth conference, Malcolm was concluding his presentation. "So when people ask me if I regret what happened that day, my answer surprises them. I don't regret it. I wouldn't wish it on anyone else, but for me, it became a catalyst for growth and change. Sometimes life's most painful moments can lead to its most meaningful opportunities." The standing ovation that followed brought tears to Elijah's eyes. Dorothy leaned over, patting his hand. "You've raised a remarkable young man," she said. "He's going to change things." "He already has," Elijah replied. That evening, the Washington family, Elijah, Malcolm, and Zoe, gathered for dinner at Elijah's penthouse apartment. Despite their divorce years earlier, Elijah and Zoe had maintained a respectful co-parenting relationship, united in their dedication to Malcolm's well-being. "So it's official," Zoe announced, setting aside her phone. "Rebecca lost her case. Stephen just texted me the details." "I'm not surprised," Elijah remarked, "but I am relieved. This brings formal closure to the legal aspect, at least." Malcolm absorbed the news thoughtfully. "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did wrong?" "Some people aren't capable of that level of self-reflection," Zoe answered. "They'll rewrite the narrative to protect their self-image rather than confront uncomfortable truths about their behavior." "Your mother's right," Elijah agreed. "But the important thing isn't whether Rebecca Miller has a personal epiphany. It's about the systemic changes her actions inadvertently triggered. And those changes had been substantial." Skyline Airways had implemented comprehensive anti-bias training for all 12,000 employees, from baggage handlers to board members. An anonymous reporting system allowed staff to flag concerning interactions without fear of retaliation. Customer satisfaction scores among minority passengers had already shown measurable improvement. Most significantly, other airlines had taken notice. 3 major carriers had reached out to Elijah about implementing similar programs, recognizing that getting ahead of potential incidents was both ethically sound and good business practice. "I've been thinking," Malcolm said, setting down his fork, "about my college plans." Elijah and Zoe exchanged glances. Malcolm was entering his junior year of high school, and until now, had expressed interest in pursuing film production or possibly engineering. "I want to double major in business and social justice," Malcolm continued. "I've seen firsthand how corporate decisions can either perpetuate inequality or help dismantle it. I want to work at that intersection." Zoe smiled. "That sounds perfect for you, honey." "I want to follow in your footsteps, Dad," Malcolm added. "Not just running a company, but creating one with values at its core." Elijah felt a surge of emotion, pride, certainly, but also a bittersweet recognition that his son's accelerated maturity had been partially forged through undeserved hardship. "Whatever path you choose," he told Malcolm, "you've already demonstrated the character it takes to succeed. Not just in business, but in life." As their meal concluded, Malcolm received a text from James Chen, who had been promoted to lead flight attendant after demonstrating exceptional leadership during the crisis. The flight crew that had witnessed the original incident had been transformed by it. James in particular had become an outspoken advocate for creating a more inclusive atmosphere on board. "James says Dorothy is telling everyone at headquarters about her honorary grandson speaking at the conference today," Malcolm laughed. "I think she's adopted me." "You could do worse for a surrogate grandmother," Zoe smiled. "She's quite the force of nature." As the evening drew to a close, Malcolm stood on the balcony overlooking the Atlanta skyline, reflecting on the journey of the past month. The humiliation of that day on the plane had evolved into something he never could have anticipated: a platform, a purpose, and a deepened understanding of both society's flaws and its potential for growth. His phone buzzed with a notification. Another news outlet had picked up the story of the judge's verdict in Rebecca's lawsuit. The headline read, "Flight attendant who removed CEO's son loses discrimination case, airline launches scholarship program in response." Malcolm smiled slightly. The story wasn't over yet, but this chapter was reaching its conclusion. And the next one, he sensed, would be even more meaningful. The gleaming Skyline Airways Boeing 787 Dreamliner cut through wispy clouds on its approach to San Francisco International Airport. In the first-class cabin, Malcolm Washington, now 17, reviewed his notes for the keynote address he would deliver at the National Conference on Corporate Social Responsibility the following morning. "Nervous?" Elijah asked from the adjacent seat. "A little," Malcolm admitted. "It's a bigger audience than I'm used to." "You'll be magnificent," Elijah assured him. "Just speak your truth, as you've been doing all year." 1 year had passed since the incident that transformed both Malcolm's life and Skyline Airways. What began as a humiliating experience had catalyzed remarkable changes throughout the organization and beyond. The flight attendant approached their seats, Denise Cooper, now Senior Cabin Services Manager for the Western region. "Mr. Washington, Malcolm, will be landing in approximately 20 minutes. Can I get you anything before we begin our descent?" "We're fine, thank you, Denise," Elijah replied. "And congratulations again on your promotion. Well deserved." After Denise moved on, Malcolm observed, "She's the third crew member from that flight who's been promoted. James Chen is now our Director of Customer Experience, Denise oversees cabin services for the entire Western region, and Captain Stevens joined the executive leadership team as VP of Operations," Elijah enumerated. "People who demonstrate moral courage during difficult moments generally make excellent leaders in all circumstances." The San Francisco skyline appeared in the distance, golden in the late afternoon sunlight. Malcolm closed his laptop, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The lawsuit with Rebecca Miller had concluded months ago, but its ripple effects continued. Rebecca had eventually found employment with a smaller regional airline, though her notoriety had followed her. Despite her attempts to reframe the narrative, the facts of the case had been too well documented to dispute. More significantly, the incident had sparked industry-wide examination of how airlines handled bias incidents. The Department of Transportation had convened a special task force, on which Elijah served, to develop best practices for ensuring equitable treatment of all passengers. Malcolm's Future in Flight Scholarship Program had expanded from its initial 20 recipients to over 100 nationwide, with corporate sponsorships from major aviation industry players. The first cohort would begin college that fall, their paths toward aviation careers supported by both financial assistance and mentorship. Dorothy Williams, now in her mid-70s, had become Skyline's unofficial historian and conscience, sharing her civil rights experiences with new employee cohorts during their orientation. Her friendship with Malcolm had deepened into a genuine intergenerational bond, with weekly phone calls regardless of their respective locations. As the aircraft touched down smoothly on the San Francisco runway, Malcolm thought about the speech he would deliver tomorrow. He would share his story, certainly, but more importantly, he would articulate the lesson he had learned, that meaningful change required both principled individuals willing to speak uncomfortable truths and responsive institutions willing to listen and evolve. The deplaning process went smoothly, with Malcolm and Elijah among the first passengers to exit. As they walked through the jet bridge, Malcolm noticed a young black girl, perhaps 12 or 13, watching him with wide, recognizing eyes. "Excuse me," she said shyly as he approached. "Are you Malcolm Washington? From the Skyline Airways story?" Malcolm smiled. "That's me." The girl's mother looked on proudly as her daughter continued, "I did my school project on you and your dad. About standing up for yourself and making change happen. I got an A." "That's fantastic," Malcolm replied, genuinely touched. "What's your name?" "Jasmine," she answered. "I want to be a pilot someday." Elijah stepped forward. "Jasmine, have you heard about our Future in Flight Scholarship Program? You should apply when you're a high school senior." Jasmine's eyes widened further. "Really? That would be amazing." As they exchanged contact information with Jasmine's mother, Malcolm experienced a profound sense of purpose. This was why the painful incident had been worth enduring, not for the attention or validation, but for the doors it might open for kids like Jasmine. At the terminal, James Chin waited to greet them, having flown in the previous day to prepare for the conference. "Welcome to San Francisco," he said, shaking hands with both Washingtons. "How was the flight?" "Perfectly smooth," Elijah replied. "Your training protocols have clearly taken root." As they walked toward the exit, James updated them on conference preparations and the latest company developments. The diversity initiatives implemented after the incident had now been fully integrated into Skyline's operational DNA, with measurable improvements in both employee satisfaction and customer experience metrics. "By the way," James added, "you'll never guess who's speaking at the airline industry breakout session tomorrow. Dorothy Williams. She's becoming quite the sought-after speaker on organizational culture." Malcolm laughed. "She told me she was just popping over to California for a little thing. I should have known she was downplaying it." At the hotel, Malcolm excused himself to his room to finalize his speech and call his mother. Zoe had been unable to attend the conference due to her art gallery opening in Philadelphia, but she remained his most trusted advisor on public speaking. "Just remember to breathe," she counseled after hearing him practice. "And don't rush through the emotional parts. Let people sit with those feelings." "Thanks, Mom," Malcolm said. "Wish you were here. I'm always with you, baby. And so proud of who you're becoming." The following morning, Malcolm stood backstage at the conference center, adjusting his tie as the introducer outlined his biographical details for the audience. Through the curtain, he could see the packed auditorium, executives, policymakers, academics, and students all gathered to hear perspectives on corporate responsibility in the 21st century. "Ready?" Elijah asked, appearing beside him. "As I'll ever be," Malcolm replied. Remember why we're doing this, Elijah said quietly. It's not about us anymore. Malcolm nodded, understanding perfectly. What had begun as a personal humiliation had evolved into something much larger than one teenager's experience on one flight. It had become about creating systemic change, about using privilege and platform to open doors for others who might otherwise remain locked out. And now, the introducer's voice boomed, please welcome to the stage Malcolm Washington, founder of the Future in Flight Initiative and student activist, along with his father, Elijah Washington, CEO of Skyline Airways. As they walked onto the stage together, the applause was thunderous. Malcolm approached the podium, took a deep breath, and began. 1 year ago today, I boarded a flight that changed my life. Not because of where it took me, but because of what happened before it even left the ground. He shared his story with poise and vulnerability, neither minimizing the pain of discrimination nor dwelling on victimhood. He emphasized the transformative power of accountability, the importance of allies willing to speak up, and the responsibility that comes with having a platform. The measure of progress isn't whether incidents of bias occur, Malcolm concluded. They will, because we're all human and carry implicit biases. The true measure is how we respond when they happen. Do we deny, deflect, and defend the status quo? Or do we acknowledge, learn, and commit to doing better? In the front row, Dorothy Williams wiped away a tear as she applauded. Beside her sat James Chen and several other Skyline employees whose careers have been shaped by their responses to that pivotal incident. After the speech, during the Q&A session, a young aviation management student asked, Malcolm, do you plan to join your father's company after college? Malcolm glanced at Elijah before answering. I'll definitely work there during summers and breaks to learn the business from the ground up. But my father taught me something important. Sometimes you can create more change from the outside than from within existing structures. So while Skyline will always be part of my story, I might need to write my own chapter first. The day concluded with a special event, the official introduction of the newest addition to the Skyline Airways fleet, a Boeing 777 emblazoned with a unique livery celebrating diversity and named the Dorothy Williams. Dorothy herself stood speechless as the aircraft was unveiled in a digital presentation, her hand pressed to her heart in disbelief. You named a plane after me, she finally managed. The first of our Civil Rights Heroes series, Elijah confirmed. Each new aircraft will honor someone who stood up for equality and justice, often without recognition. You're just the beginning. Later that evening, at a small private dinner, Malcolm sat between his father and Dorothy, surrounded by key figures who had been part of their journey over the past year. As conversations flowed around the table, Malcolm reflected on how a single incident, painful as it was, had created ripples of positive change that continued to expand outward. James raised his glass in a toast. To Malcolm and Elijah Washington, who turned a moment of injustice into a movement for inclusion. And to Dorothy Williams, Elijah added, who reminds us that the civil rights movement didn't end in the 1960s but continues every day through small acts of courage and kindness. Dorothy shook her head modestly, but her eyes shone with emotion. I'm just an old woman who couldn't stay silent when I saw wrong being done. The real toast is to the future, to all the young Malcolms and Jasmines who won't have to fight the same battles we did because of the work we're doing now. As the evening drew to a close, Malcolm stepped onto the hotel balcony overlooking San Francisco Bay. The lights of the city sparkled below, and a Skyline Airways plane traced its path across the night sky, its navigation lights blinking steadily. Elijah joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Penny for your thoughts. I was just thinking about that moment when you first stepped onto the plane, Malcolm replied. How everything changed in an instant. For the better, ultimately, Elijah noted. Yeah, Malcolm agreed. But not everyone has a father who can board a plane and right a wrong. Most people have to just swallow their humiliation and move on. Which is why we can't, Elijah said firmly. Swallow it and move on, I mean. With privilege comes responsibility. Malcolm nodded, the cool San Francisco breeze washing over them. 1 year ago, I was just a kid excited to visit my dad's company. Now I'm speaking at national conferences and running a scholarship program. Life takes some unexpected turns. The most meaningful journeys usually do, Elijah replied. The question is what we make of those turns when they come. As they stood together in companionable silence, Malcolm reflected on all that had transpired since that fateful flight. The public attention would eventually fade, as it always does. Rebecca Miller would become a footnote in the story rather than its central antagonist. Even the viral video would gradually be replaced by newer, more shocking content in the relentless cycle of social media. But what would remain were the changes they had implemented, the doors they had opened, the conversations they had started. Somewhere out there was another young person like Jasmine who might now see a path forward that hadn't existed before. That, Malcolm decided, made everything worthwhile. Ready to head back inside? Elijah asked after a while. Almost, Malcolm replied. Just taking a moment to appreciate how far we've come. And how far we still have to go. Father and son stood together, framed against the night sky, two generations united in purpose, transformed by adversity, and committed to creating a world where the color of one's skin determined neither their destination nor their journey. Malcolm's journey teaches us that discrimination doesn't just happen in history books, it occurs every day in modern America. When confronted with racism, we have choices: remain silent, confront it directly, or transform it into positive change. The Washington family chose the latter, using their privilege and platform to create systemic transformation rather than seeking mere personal vindication. This story reminds us that true change requires both individual courage and institutional accountability. One person speaking up can create ripples, but lasting impact demands structural reform. Malcolm learned that sometimes life's most painful moments become opportunities for growth, not just for himself but for entire systems. Dorothy Williams' wisdom bridges generations, showing how the struggle for dignity continues in new forms. The most powerful response to discrimination isn't just anger or resignation, but strategic action that opens doors for others. As Malcolm discovered, when we respond to injustice by creating pathways for those who come after us, we transform personal pain into collective progress. Remember, change happens when enough people decide that next time is now. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination like Malcolm experienced? Have you ever stood up against injustice or wish you had? Your experiences matter. Comment below with your own stories of speaking truth to power. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories about overcoming adversity and creating change. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of resilience and transformation. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Together we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of the color of their skin.